and welcome to Absec Monthly, a DevCentral podcast featuring contributions from Aaron Brailsford.
You know, it is relatively easy to breach an organization because usually soft, fleshy things.
Malcolm Heath.
Just from a basic sort of security perspective, it's better to fix things earlier than later. It's better to structure your architecture and stuff that it's in such a way that it's secure rather than trying to bolt security on at the back end.
David Warburton.
What really fascinates me from a security point of view, now I like to kind of get geeky and nerd out about crypto stuff and all the latest technologies, but actually so much of security, like probably the most pivotal part of security is trust.
And more. I'm your host, Aubrey King from DevCentral, and we've got a great show for you this month, so strap on those earbuds and get ready for Absec Monthly.
All right. Thank you for joining me, F5 community. Welcome to Absec Monthly, episode 22 for May of 2024. This week is going to be a fun show as usual. We've got it, as Dave actually put it, it's going to be the best show ever, I promise. We've got a special guest with us in the round table. We'll let her introduce herself when the time comes. And we've got Malcolm's on vacation. So Malcolm, hope you're having a great time, bud. And I hope you're enjoying yourself doing whatever suits your fancy. So we're going to go through the usual. We've got some interesting stuff aside from the round table this month. I went to RSA. So RSA is that time of year, right? When all the people go to San Francisco to find out all the new stuff at the RSA Conference. And I had a couple of good interactions while I was there. One week we're going to get to talk to Akira Brand again. We've talked to her a couple of times on the show. She did sit on a round table with us at one point very early on. And I wound up catching up with her where she was part of the selection committee at RSA in terms of papers being accepted. So she has some interesting things to talk about with that. And also she ended up speaking at RSA. So we wanted to talk to her about that as well. So that'll be coming up kind of at the end of the show. And at the beginning here, I had a conversation with a guy who has been on LinkedIn like crazy and all over the social media, Steve Wilson, right? He is known for his involvement with the OWASP Top 10 for Large Language Model Applications, which we talk about ad nauseum on the podcast due to probably my involvement in that. And it's in the news a lot. So Steve started the whole project, and he's not here to talk to us about AI. This month, he is going to talk to us with another guy who's also in the project named Ken Huang. And the two of them have written books on artificial intelligence. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to get ahead in the security authoring space, right? We're going to give you a break from the AI this month a little bit, even in the roundtable. Actually, we're gonna take a little bit of a break there. That's exciting. So I think without further ado, I'm going to roll my conversation with Steve Wilson and Ken Huang.
What do you guys have tips for people who are looking to get into writing a book? Like, let's say they have an idea. How do you get from idea to pen to paper? How do you find somebody that might want your idea?
Yeah. So I've done this twice. Once is ancient history, as I did write an Addison Wesley book that was part of the Java series back probably 1999, 2000. But it was, in both cases, it was the same thing, which is I started putting out materials on a topic and somebody said, you should write a book about it. And, back in 2000, I certainly didn't have a blog, if anybody had a blog, but I was writing. A lot of it was just being shared internally at Sun Microsystems, where I was when I was working on Java, but people were reading what I was writing and they were saying, like, there's a book here. And in this case, it was working on that top 10 list. I was putting out a lot of blogs on my own LinkedIn that people were reading and I was getting feedback on. And so what I'd say is I would discourage people from cold pitching a book. Start by writing about the topic, do it in smaller chunks, get out there and socialize it with the community. It's so easy to do right now.
Yeah.
Get a Medium blog or a Substack or your LinkedIn and start sharing those ideas. You'll probably form a much stronger opinion about what you want to do, because by the time I got to doing this, I had a complete model in my head of what I wanted to say to people about how to build a secure AI application. It just became the act of getting that down on paper and filling in the research things. So, and for me, that's what worked, is when I got out there in both cases, really in public, and started talking about these things, the book process just kind of fell into place.
Came to you.
Yeah, V.
Any tips, Ken?
Yeah, I echo Steve's idea. I think certainly is very well advanced. One more I can add is like you need to force yourself to at least write something every day for the book, even it's a garbage. Just write something, right? And it could be like tomorrow you just throw it out, but write something. Like what I do actually is the morning, my brain is a flash. So every morning I wake up, but before I go anywhere, I just write a few.
Nice.
And afternoons, then I'm dozy. So I don't write. Right?
It's that post-lunch. It just
it's
just hot.
Yeah, it's afternoon class. So that's not good.
Well, then that's it sounds like you guys are well on your way. When can we expect your sometime August, you think?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, if you are an O'Reilly subscriber, you can go grab the first half of the book. It's online already. If you're not an O'Reilly subscriber, you can go get a 7-day free trial and do it anyway. But right now, I think the timeline we're on, there should be actual hard copies available on Amazon by August.
Okay. Yeah, so pre-order this book, please. And complementary to this book you can already order it at everywhere, like Amazon, Springer, Barnes Noble.
In a trade, you take this one, not take this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's even, I think, in Target. I saw some they in Target. Yeah. So even in retail store. So you can find this book, and we will trade this book. I need to sign this book for you, though.
I'll sign that.
Yeah, I will get this. And thanks also for Steve for me to pre-review some of the chapters. So really appreciate. So. Anyway, so that's it, Aubrey.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining me. I appreciate it. That's
Thanks, Aubrey, for with this report.
You bet. Hopefully it'll help some of the community out, and thank you, community, for checking us out. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.
Love talking to those guys. And if you want to check out the full interview, because really that was just 4 and change minutes of that clip. The full interview is available at community.f5.com. We're going to have a link right in the video for this, at least on our YouTube portion of the podcast, so that you can get all there were some, I think, probably like 20 some minutes of it. The great thing is if you're looking at writing a book, definitely tune in, because we've got 2 guys with 2 different publishers here that had 2 very different experiences in terms of how they started these projects. So we just got to hear the end of that interview. So go back and check out really the first 15 minutes of it are really great. And you'll hear a little bit more about what their books are all about. So with that, I think we're going to kind of move on and into our roundtable, where Mr. Warburton will be bringing up all the topics of conversation, and we're going to introduce a guest for the month. So I'm going to get out of here and leave all the talking to the smart people.
Right.
Thank you so much, Aubrey, for setting us up and saying this is going to be the best show ever. Absolutely no pressure at all. So hopefully it all goes kind of smoothly, especially being as it is, as Aubrey said the first time. I'm going to be taking us through the news stories, but then passing over to my good friends and colleagues, Aaron and Sam, for all the insightful commentary. Aaron, I will come back to you in 1 second, but Sam, could you let everyone know who you are, what you do, what your kind of average day looks like, and what your background is?
Hi there. So I'm Samantha Bohr. I am a cyber threat intelligence analyst with F5. I provide primarily internal facing intelligence to our decision makers to better help secure our environment. Typical day for me is a lot of reading intelligence and determining how it applies to our organization and what improvements we can make based off of things we're seeing. A little bit of my background: I've been at F5 since August of 2022. And prior to that, I spent about 12 years at the FBI as an intelligence analyst focusing on international terrorism investigations and counterintelligence investigations.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sam. Well, great to have you with us, and great to know that we have people like yourselves looking out for our organization as well as other ones. Aaron, you've helped me pick a bunch of stories to go through today. So why don't we dive straight in? We've got some pretty big ones, particularly some really big breaches from really large organizations that you'd like to think a bit better of, I suppose. The first one we wanted to pick up on was the Dell breach that was making news actually back in mid-April, I think it was. So 49 million customer records were stolen by an attacker who had, I wouldn't say a very novel method, actually is quite an old, tried and trusted method, sadly, one attacking APIs, I believe. Aaron, what are the details on this story?
Yeah, so like you say, this is a tried and trusted method. The attacker, they managed to register themselves as a partner of Dell, which gives them a partner login to a partner portal. They created a tool that generated Dell service tags. So if anybody's had a Dell laptop or a Dell anything, there's a service tag on it, which is, I think, 7 digits or 6 digits, alphanumeric. They obviously follow some kind of a pattern, although if you've only got, 1 or 2 devices in front of you, they look kind of random. And their tool just generated millions of service tags. And then they asked the API that's available to partners, what are the details behind this service tag? Over and over and over again. Was it 5,000 times a minute for 3 weeks?
That's a fairly high kind of request rate, 5,000 a minute. You would, and for 3 weeks as well, that's a long time. Yeah. I mean, it would be easy to kind of point fingers, I suppose, and say, how could they not see this? But you have to wonder how many organizations wouldn't see this kind of traffic, because it's legitimate, right? It's not an attack of any kind. It's making a valid request against the API.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the baseline requests per second is of that API, right? Or I don't know how many partners they have looking up details of systems day in, day out, but like 5,000 a minute is a lot. It feels like that should show up somewhere.
It actually reminds me, we've been talking a lot recently in kind of presentations off the back of our identity threat report. And in it, we talk a lot about the kind of bots and automation, and there's this concept of canary accounts, which the reason I mentioned this, Aaron, to kind of your point, is the whole point of having a kind of fake account, if you like, that's under the attacker control, is that they can use it to test authentication, but actually the traffic to that account is kind of masked with all the genuine customer traffic. So, having those kind of dummy, fake attacker control accounts are great ways to gain and maintain like legitimate access to not even a compromised service, just a genuine service. But in it can kind of, they can manipulate traffic to that fake account if they need to mask other traffic that they're sending.
It sounds like they had several fake accounts as well. So I don't know if they spread this out across accounts or if they just registered several and used one for the attack and the others were just decoys. I know it struck me that there were many ways in which this could have been mitigated, right? Like applying least privilege. Does every partner need to be able to look up the details of every Dell service tag? Maybe that is Dell's service model. That's say not the service model that F5 uses. You can't just phone up with anybody else's serial number and get all of the information about the box or the account. Rate limiting requests. That seems like an easy one. That would at least slowed them down. Yeah. Maybe made the attack impractical. And logging invisibility, which we go on about a lot, but is very difficult to do in practice.
For sure. I was actually kind of digging through some open source intelligence kind of feeds the other day, and was kind of collating a list of API breaches that I could kind of gather over the past few years, and actually just kind of focus on 2023 for the bit of research I was doing recently. And it probably won't come as any kind of surprise to anyone that follows API security, but the overwhelming majority of like root cause of breaches was broken authentication, swiftly followed by broken authorization, which, to your point, clearly they had authentication because they could authenticate to this API. So great, authentication's in place, clearly no authorization to check that, as you said, not every partner should be able to access every single asset. Sam, have you heard any kind of rumblings about this in the kind of the forums that you kind of lurk around, or any kind of intelligence feeds that you've been reading? Do you expect to see any kind of outcome from this?
Yeah, so of course, with a breach like this, where threat actors are getting information about victims, we expect to see some spear phishing and very targeted phishing campaigns that are looking to gather further information and looking to, steal credit card information, potentially steal identities, potentially even gain access if they know enough of where the person works, if it's a target of interest, to potentially gain access to those corporate networks based on the magnitude of information that they do currently have because of the breach. So that is a huge concern following breaches like this.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. Moving on, as we do have a lot to get through, Ticketmaster, unfortunately, an even bigger breach, I would say. I think something like 1.3 terabytes of data, consisting 550 million stolen customer records. As far as I know, Ticketmaster are yet to absolutely confirm that the leak or this breach is kind of genuine. But we're seeing that people kind of involved in the breach are trying to sell the data for around about $500,000, I believe. But still no confirmation. Aaron, what else can you let us know? What can you share about this breach?
Yeah, so it's unconfirmed by Ticketmaster themselves, I believe, but there's certainly inside sources, shall we say, being quoted that are suggesting that this was carried out by a threat actor who got access via a managed service provider. So they pivoted through an MSP into Ticketmaster. So at least this wasn't an API with broken authentication or broken authorization, for a change. And yeah, they've allegedly stolen, like you say, some 500 and something million rows of data that include names, postal addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, and the last 4 digits of credit card or debit card numbers, and the expiry dates associated with those orders, which is pretty big. I mean, in terms of what you can use the data for, I think is going to be slightly different than maybe the Dell breach, but it's certainly a lot of data that could be used for those kinds of phishing attacks, secondary, persuade, send emails with card details in, right, to persuade the person, the recipient, that, well, we're definitely who we say we are because we have your last 4 digits, right? How else could we have the last 4 digits?
I was just going to say, Sam, I mean, from your experience, I mean, from looking at the records that are stolen, and it's as Aaron said, it's considerable. It's full name, email address, postal address, telephone number. Credit card numbers are apparently hashed. So obviously, hashed being a kind of one-way crypto function, you shouldn't be able to kind of reverse numbers from that. So, is the theft of those hashed credit card numbers actually an issue? Do people have cause for concern here?
I think with that sort of information, it, like Aaron mentioned, it's going to compel people to act and provide further information, and it may garner better results than the information from the Dell breach. But this also calls to light organizations need to really vet who they are working with and third-party services that they're utilizing.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. I think, the last time F5 Labs dug into looking at cloud breaches a number of years ago, we found a couple of years ago that actually pivoting from or breaching a service provider or an MSP of any kind and either just compromising their systems directly or pivoting. And there was one case of an MSP years ago who I believe had VPNs to all the different virtual private networks in the cloud, and then so by attacking this one MSP, the threat actors were able to get to a number of different victims on the back end. Aaron, what's the kind of what are we expecting from Ticketmaster? Any kind of next steps, or are we expecting any kind of confirmation from them?
I expect, given the amount of like media attention, press attention is on this, I expect Ticketmaster to make some kind of a formal statement. One thing that I thought was interesting about this, when it was first, I'd say disclosed, but that's not really the right terms. The data was posted for sale on dark web breach forums, and the immediate response was some questions from other commentators as to whether or not this data was legitimate or whether this was just like a lure to try and get people to pay money for nothing. And since Sam sort of lives in that world, I wanted to ask Sam, how easy is it to actually figure out if something that's being offered for sale on the dark web is legit or if it's just, rumor and nonsense?
So I think when you're determining if a threat actor has any validity, you're looking at previous sales, you're looking at how long they've been a member on forums, and you're looking for, honestly, like just comments on those posts. Like I've seen some posts that are like, oh, don't believe this actor, they've scammed me out of X number of dollars and what have you. So I think, length of membership, positive or negative feedback, all of those sort of things that can bolster the person's reputation, if you will.
It's a really good point. Sorry, Aaron, carry on.
I was going to say, how much of those forums actually policed, for want of a better word? Because everything you just said is exactly the same approach I'd apply to, do I want to buy these car parts off this person on like a random car club forum, which something I, for my bank balance's sake, sadly I do often. And we're applying exactly the same approach to some dark web forum. How well policed are they to ensure that this isn't bots spamming those forums with positive reviews or negative reviews and gaming that system?
Yeah, you're definitely right. It's funny that you mentioned that. It's the same exact technique, and with anything on the internet, you have to take it with a grain of salt, right? And you have to like really raid into it and dig into it to see. Like I feel like bots are pretty well. You can identify them pretty well based on repetitiveness or what have you. I have seen some forums that are more policed, if you will, than others, and you tend to look at those like more prolific threat actors on the forums and what they're kind of talking about, and if they have any input or weigh in, if things have gotten taken down, comments closed down, that sort of thing. So some are more policed than others, but it's definitely, it's on the internet. Anybody can say anything, right?
It does make you wonder, there are so many breaches now. I mean, the kind of total breach kind of data set, the record size, if you like, of all breaches currently collected, from collection one to all the ones that kind of just eventually get amalgamated, you have to wonder if there's anything, is the price of those records coming down? Have attackers kind of commoditized the kind of breaches so much because this data's been out there for so long? There are so many records now. I mean, how unique and how worthwhile are these records anymore? But moving on. Actually, Aaron, you made an interesting point about fake accounts there and potentially using to kind of game the reputation scores on the dark web forums. It sounds like fake accounts were at the root, possibly, or certainly used as part of the long running attack, about 3+ years, I think, against Docker Hub. So Leo reported on this, I think, a few weeks ago in the This Week in Security article over on the DevCentral forum. This one sounds a little bit like, on face value, like it might have been a supply chain attack. We've had so many stories over the years from repositories being compromised and malicious code being injected into trusted open source libraries. Now, on the face of it, this Docker breach sounded a little bit like this, but digging into it, Aaron, it doesn't sound like it is a supply chain attack. Can you kind of describe to us what was actually been going on at Dropbox? Sorry, not Dropbox. What's been going on at Docker Hub? And what have attackers been doing for 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, so the report was this about imageless Docker containers, which, and you're right, when you first read it, malicious Docker containers created, is this clearly a supply chain attack? But it isn't, I don't think, a supply chain attack. It's some attacker or attackers creating essentially spam Docker container registry entries and using that as just pages to direct people at other malicious content. So part of the report, some of the examples were sending people who were searching for ebooks to a .ru domain that would then try and get people to pay for said ebooks, which may or may not actually exist, right? Just a way to get people to give you their card details. Some of them pointed to what appeared to be completely innocent websites, and there was speculation that maybe this was, the attackers or the threat actors just testing to see if they could create these pages. It's weird because, some of this reads like using Docker to conduct a phishing attack, and maybe that's just a case of using some site that has good standing and isn't going to trigger like email filtering alerts because it's just a link to Docker Hub. But all of the completely meaningless pages is just odd. Like, I get that you might create a couple to test your way around the process, but like hundreds or thousands is just...
Well, to link it back to the segue that never quite explained for this story, the whole use of fake accounts and bots, right? We see so much, a lot of research we're doing at the moment is the use of kind of bots and automation to create these fake accounts, whether they are to be used for, canary account kind of usage or otherwise. It does, strike me that these accounts are just being created en masse and then left there to be kind of picked up in the future. One thing that kind of just rang immediately true for me when I read this, again, realizing that it's not really a supply chain attack so much as it is just part of a kind of bigger phishing scam, I suppose, was one of the phishing reports we did a few years ago was kind of analyzing, millions and millions of URLs for fake sites, phishing sites, to which victims will be sent when they click on that link in the email. And so many of those, I remember highlighting at the time, were Dropbox.com or what a Google blog or Tumblr, these open pages that are designed to be free and have publicly available sites. A lot of them, years ago when we're still kind of ramping up to TLS or SSL everywhere, these sites had certificates. So they immediately kind of got a great big green tick because they had a certificate. And Aaron, to your point, they were being hosted on domains that were already trusted. Very few organizations are going to have rules that block Dropbox.com and Google.com when they're outbound firewalls because everyone needs to go there. So I found it was a great way for attackers to kind of sneak through those phishing pages to sites that, had it been a brand new IP address, a brand new domain, those things were often blocked on proxies, whereas it was quite easy to host them, I suspect, on Docker Hub where that domain is known and trusted. Let's move on to the next story. TP-Link are not doing very well, unfortunately, at the moment. They've had a number of CVEs recently that have been targeted. One which, Aaron, I'll kind of ask you to explain is 2024 5035. That's a brand new one. I think I'm targeting APIs on TP-Links. But again, this one kind of bubbled to the top of my kind of inbox because, again, recognize it's TP-Link. For anyone that keeps an eye on this Enter Intel series that we published on Labs, we found that the previous vol, almost a year old, I think, from 2023, I think it was CV 2023-1389, had a massive ramp up in activity from attackers just performing a huge amount of global wide IPv4 scans looking for these boxes to kind of compromise, to subsume them into their DDoS botnets. Not too sure whether the kind of end goal for this CVE is the same, but I think from the signs of it, it's definitely a new CVE. Aaron, how do attackers actually conducting this one?
Yeah, it's funny. I was writing This Week in Security earlier, and I was writing about this and linking back to the Sensor Intel series. It made me chuckle that not that long ago, CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities list added the previous TP-Link CVE.
Yep.
And now we have a new one. Different routers, the C5400X gaming router this time, rather than the whichever one it was previously. A different Archer series router. This one is a CVSS of 10.0, so literally as bad as it can get. It's not that often you see it. It's just a flat-out 10.0 CVSS score.
Cool.
And it's been patched in the latest release, released literally a few days ago. The previous to that patch, the router exposes a number of ports, 8888, 8889, and 8890. It exposes them at startup, and from what I can tell, to the internet, which is not great. They were supposed to only accept certain commands, but apparently you can just stick another command on the end using our old friend, the semicolon, or the ampersand, or the pipe character. So it's just basically shell command injection. It reads a lot like these ports are accepting commands that get passed pretty much directly to the shell with like a basic string comparison to make sure it's only the commands they thought it should accept, forgetting about the fact that anything after like the semicolon becomes an entirely separate command as far as the shell's concerned. And so you get arbitrary command execution by the look of it as root on these devices by default. And yeah, like you say, sort of commodity routers, stuff that sits in people's homes, they're a prime target for being subsumed into botnets because there are millions of them in millions of homes. And it's a really easy way to get a giant botnet to go and use to do other things like compromise other devices or launch denial of service attacks.
I think I remember reading right, or rather, if I remember rightly, when reading up about this vuln, this CVE, it sounds like the end goal might be a bit different. Am I right thinking that this one had the capabilities to kind of inspect traffic going in and out of that kind of routers network? I seem to remember reading something about attackers potentially being able to either redirect traffic or steal things like, well, basically anything that gets sent that isn't in clear text through that network.
Yeah, I think so. And it's sorry, completely distracted there by something. An interesting thing about compromising network devices, I've been asked this question a number of times when it comes to big IPs, for example. If someone gets root access, what can they do? And it's not just the modifying of the config or installing malicious binaries that you've got to worry about. It's the fact that you can then sniff all of the traffic going through that box, which in the case of a home router, how big of a deal is it really? Most stuff is HTTPS. Hopefully most users are savvy enough that they'd notice if it's the wrong certificate on a website. Maybe they aren't. Maybe there are still apps out there, especially on mobile devices, that communicate in clear text APIs or don't validate certificates when they connect to APIs. That's fairly big.
I mean, to your point about certificates, yeah, one of the points I don't think I mentioned on the previous article about the kind of evangelist Docker containers from Docker Hub was a lot of those sites that were a lot of those kind of repositories, if you like, that were hosting those scam phishing sites, redirect sites. We used a lot of redirectors to go. There was like kind of typo variations of bit.ly.com and so on, and then a dozen or other ones, most of which I think now are blocked by browsers that all already know that they are kind of malicious domains. But again, pet peeve for me, to be honest with you, going back to my time of researching for phishing and fraud, I think just how much domains or how little domain names and certificates mean to your average person, even to, I would say, most of us security professionals. There are so many domains in use, so many third parties, so many components, so many redirects, so many different platforms used for, say, a shopping service or a payment service, that actually with all this kind of redirecting and bouncing around, I'm not sure that anyone can really confidently say they know and trust every single domain they go into. So I think clearly, I think any kind of redirects, whilst it might throw up a little warning message to the user. There's a good percentage of people that will just click through it and ignore it. So yeah, potentially I would say quite a damaging one. And actually, if you consider how many people now work from home, or at least hybrids, that's potentially, again, you'd like to think, home workers, VPNing in, other apps will be using secure connections. They might not do. There might be metadata that can be stolen and can be used. So interesting one. I think I wanted to mention as well, actually, that I noticed when kind of doing work for the last Center Intel series article, comparing our feed of attacks to that seen by the F5 Threat Campaign Service, and was really interested that actually the D-Link, a number of D-Link routes are kind of top of their list. Now, the reason that I think we have a difference of kind of most attacked or most targeted CVE between the sensors that we use and the ones that also power F5 threat campaigns is what those sensors do and how interactive they are and so on. So really interesting to see that slightly different variation in terms of the most attacks or most targeted CVE, but it's just another IoT device. It's yet another home broadband router. These things just seem kind of ripe for the picking.
They are. You actually just made me think of something, talking about not paying attention to certificates being valid or sites you're directed to. Over the past 2-3 months, we've had tunnel crack and tunnel vision, the two sort of VPN targeting attack techniques.
Of course, yeah.
And both of those, in some way, shape, or form, rely on redirecting traffic to somewhere that you aren't expecting to connect to. And tunnel vision, the most recent one, not tunnel crack, is specifically about having a malicious DHCP server in the network to inject routes onto the client device. And if you control the router in someone's home, you probably control their DNS, their DHCP server. So right. That would be a good way of carrying out a tunnel vision attack.
Yeah, very good point. Sam, is this something that kind of internal threat teams, typically we kind of talk about, we consumer grade IoT devices or SOHO devices, for example. Any kind of thoughts on these kind of, more consumer kind of grade devices?
Yeah, so compromise like home devices, routers, etc., have been known to be used by state-sponsored threat actors to create obfuscation in their activities and be able to breach networks they might not otherwise be able to breach, coming from a trusted location or what have you. So that is a concern for us, especially with state-sponsored actors looking to conduct cyber espionage and get intellectual property of organizations. The other thing I wanted to highlight with this new vulnerability from TP-Link, researchers and threat actors alike love the 10 CVS score, and they love RCEs. So it's likely to get a lot of attention and a lot of poking and prodding and proof of concepts and attention. So it is a concern for everybody, people using these devices and for organizations that may be targeted with these devices in the middle.
Yeah, good point. Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. I think it's often interesting, we talk a lot about ultimately IoT on FL Labs because, again, when we look at the CVs being scanned for, it's quite commonly those IoT devices being targeted. And it's sometimes important to try and link those consumer grade devices to the enterprise, to businesses. I think it'll be easy for many people to think, oh, well, I don't own one of those, or it's not my enterprise environment. So, what's the big deal? But clearly, these things are a concern for all of us. Sam, I'm going to stick with you for the last story, which you brought to me, actually. Capture the Flag events, hackathons are not new. They've been at DEF CON, Black Hat, all the kind of big conferences for a while. One of my favorite ones to read about was the kind of ATM and the voting machines being hacked. I think the Voting Village is what it's called. This one sounds a bit different to me. This one sounds like it might be the first one I know of that is organized and sponsored, if you like, by a country, by a nation. Matrix Cup. Sam, what can you tell us about the Matrix Cup?
Yeah, so earlier this month, actually May 13th, the news picked up a new hacking competition that is taking place in the PRC in the People's Republic of China. It's scheduled for late June, and it is offering 2.5 million prize pool for 0-day exploits on a series of different devices, software, etc. Some printers, some routers, mobile devices, etc. So that's a concern because the PRC also has a law in place that any 0-day vulnerabilities that are discovered by Chinese researchers, organizations in China, and foreign organizations with a footprint in China must disclose the discovered vulnerability to the government within 2 days of discovery. So that it's going to be interesting to see if those vulnerabilities are also disclosed to the organizations that are impacted.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on that point actually, because, to your point, Sam, when these events are put on, they're done for benevolent reasons, for the benefit of everyone. We bring all the security research together, hack the living daylights out of things, and then publish findings so that everyone can go and patch and fix these things straight away. I'm not sure if we have any official statement, but you have to assume that's not going to be the case for this event, or at least that's not the only outcome. And that, Sam, to your point, that it does sound very much like PRC will be kind of hoarding, potentially, these vulnerabilities.
Yeah, there hasn't been any published documentation on how the discovered vulnerabilities will be handled, but it is likely that it's going to be building a library, if you will, for future malicious activity.
Absolutely. Well, potentially something to keep very close eye on, as I'm sure you will, Sam, in your role, but I think everyone to keep a close eye on and see what comes out the back of it. And if we get the full story, who knows what will be revealed and what will be kept closely guarded. But that's wrapping us up for today for the news stories. Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us as always. Sam, thank you so much for being our guest for today with Malcolm's continued vacation. I'm going to kick things back over to you, Aubrey.
Thanks. I appreciate it. And great stuff as always. The TP link made me the TP link piece made me think if maybe that's been the issue with my cable modem recently. I don't actually have a TP link router, so maybe I'm not impacted after all. Anyways, and anyone who's been watching any of my live stream stuff knows what I'm talking about there. It's been a challenge for me, to say the least. So I think we're going to move on into the rest of the show. We did have a piece with Akira Brand from RSA, which I caught up with her. And when Akira and I get together, it's kind of fun. We just sort of, it's just like random consciousness streams. And so we talked about a whole lot of topics while we chatted for, I don't know, something like an hour and a half or so. I've got a full interview out there with her, and I'm just going to play you pieces of it. So this is about 7 minutes of a whole 25-minute interview that is available, as I said, on community.f5.com. I'd encourage you to go check the whole one, especially if you're in for some entertainment. Akira's a great personality. So this is fragments of our streams of consciousness, and I hope you enjoy.
And so, speaking, obviously you spoke here. So
yes.
What was your talk?
So I talked about a concept coined by the Google SRE team in 2016 called toil.
Okay.
And what toil is it's work that is automatable, manual, repetitive, interrupt-driven, and doesn't actually add any enduring value to the process or system that it is being worked on with once the work is done. So myself and my colleague Jennifer Chopesky of Target came and spoke together, and we compared and contrasted the different sorts of toil between the startup world, which is where I have my expertise, and the giant enterprise world, which is where Jennifer has her expertise. And we discovered it's actually the same toil. It's the same stuff. And the process to address it, like the meta process, is the same no matter what type of organization you work at. And we developed and designed this process together and tested it out at our respective organizations. And hey, it worked. So I'm happy about that.
That's really neat. And so is this your first time speaking at RSA?
This is my first time at RSA at all.
First time at RSA and speaking. Wow. That's spectacular.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a fabulous conference. Yeah, so something that would be interesting for your listeners to know is that I was on the selection committee for the DevSecOps track. And we really emphasized this year hearing from practitioners, because that's what we really want at RSA. We want people that have the boots on the ground, that have the experience of going through what we have to do day in and day out just to make sure our front lines are safe. And I think that's one of the reasons that I was selected, is because I'm a practitioner, right? I'm an engineer. And so what I'll say to our audience is that if you are a practitioner or an engineer and you're thinking, wow, like I'm not in senior leadership, like I'm not a CISO, like can I even apply at RSA? Please apply. Yeah. We want you to apply, and we will very seriously consider your application. So yeah, one thing I will mention too, as far as if you're thinking about applying for conferences, don't use AI to write your abstract. Like, don't do it. And it's not because the AI does a bad job. It just smells like AI.
It does.
It really does. You're like, AI wrote this. Like, yeah. So it's best to kind of hand roll your talk and maybe use the help of AI for your outline, but don't rely on it for your PR material for
right.
sure.
Yeah, you just can't. I mean, because I don't care if it's the best graphical model out there, you're still going to get wonky thumbs on that phone. Like if you got there's always these telltale, like, I was looking at this picture of like a bunch of people at a bar. Everything looked perfect. Oh my gosh. It's like, everything looks perfect. And then this lady had 3 thumbs. It was like, and she was in the background. She was like, most of the hands were perfect.
Yeah.
But I find like still, so it's the same thing with the non-graphical models. There are triple thumbs.
Yes.
That can happen with the words.
It's interesting to see all the vendors this year who are focusing on AI-empowered products. I want to know what those thumbs are for those vendors. Like, where are you finding the really weird stuff in the training data? Or like,
a lot of them aren't. And so you didn't do that. How did you get started with speaking?
It's really funny. I got started with speaking around age 15. And I say that not to say I've been like this fabulous public speaker since I was 15 or something.
It's a craft.
It's a craft. But what happened with me is actually I was so extremely and painfully shy that I did not speak much at all until I was 15. So I've been training myself. I had a moment of revelation of like, this is nuts. Like, I need to try to be more outgoing. And so I trained myself how to converse with people very intentionally for quite some time now. And it just morphed into teaching. When I was in music, I did a lot of teaching. And how I like to think of speaking now is I'm just sharing my research, sharing my field research, and in the intention and hope that it helps somebody else. And I think that that's a really good attitude to have toward it, as opposed to like, I want to be famous and I want to get on stage and, maybe like, oh, I have to impress people with how much I know. I don't worry about impressing people. People are going to have their own opinion no matter what. I'm just trying to help.
Well, I guess before we get booted, any last tips on maybe how someone could do something better with their talk so they get accepted?
Yeah, run your talk like 25 times. Run it until you're sick of it, and then run it again. and also know when to stop running it. There's a very fine line. Like when you get to that point of being like, wow, if I have to do this talk one more time, I'm going to like mob it. Right after that is when you should stop and just let it sit and mull and then just deliver it. And yes, and your way through that talk, you know, like take a little time, be a little improvisational, but make sure it's polished and you're going to be okay.
You heard it from a sheer brand, right? Do it 1,000,000 times.
Do it 1,000,000 flipping times.
Peter Silva told me the same thing about, like, he was an actor, and he kept telling me, like, if you got to do this kind of thing or, like, interviews, just do it 1,000,000 times. You'll be fine.
Yeah, it's so true. So true.
Well, I appreciate the time. It's always great to see you. I'm psyched you made it here.
Yeah, I'm
really.
like amazed.
It was like, you said it was close, huh? Like,
it was close. I had some health issues, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it, man. Like, but I feel like this was a worthy investment of time and energy. So
awesome.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, thank you. I'm sure I'll catch up with you again.
Great. Thanks, Aubrey.
Thank you, and thank you, community.
I love catching up with Akira. She's always a blast to chat with. So that was a couple little tidbits from the full interview. Again, like I said, please catch the entire piece at community.f5.com. And of course, if you're going to be there anyways, you may as well hit like and subscribe and do all those things, right, that are going to support the podcast going forward in the future. Once again, thank you so much, community, for tuning in this month. Thank you to our guests, Sam. It was spectacular having you on. David and Aaron, as always, you guys are chaps. We got a surprise next month. I think we might actually have a guest in the way of, I'm going to say it anyways. No, I won't. It's going to be an F5 executive, though. So stay tuned. And if it's not, I apologize for that. Then something got messed up. But he asked to be on the, I gave you a clue. It's a he. He asked to be on the podcast himself. So we are excited to have him on board next month if we can make the times work. And we're going to have spicier podcast content for you. Okay, I guess that's about it. I'm Aubrey with DevCentral, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks for checking out Absec Monthly. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please let somebody know. Click that like button and hit subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest in the Absec world between now and the next episode of Absec Monthly.